On behalf of Paramount Marvel Studios to the Thor press conference, please welcome the director of Thor, Kenneth Branagh. And also Thor himself, Hemsworth. His name looking Tom Hiddleston. Fantastic. I'll start once we're all seated. Guys, I just want to ask you when you first became acquainted with Thor before this movie. Were you aware of it at all?
Well, I was as a kid growing up in Belfast. I remember seeing this very colourful, very dynamic comic with actually some of the kinds of framing, some of the kind of dynamism in the way we tried to put the pictures together in the movie. And I remember being very struck by how colourful, vivid, and massive it was. The first picture I ever saw of Thor, we never did this in the movie, but it would have been you too, which was Thor's arms yoked around a tree trunk with his arms thicker than the tree trunk, and you behind in the classic pose on the throne with Gunja. So
the arms weren't big enough. Yeah,
next time. When you first become
it was pretty much when I got the part 6 months before and received a stack of comic books. I knew vaguely a little bit about the character. I wasn't even sure where from. I probably knew more about the Viking Norse mythology sort of section of it all. But yeah, as I said, when I got the part, it was about educating myself and going through the books.
Well, I actually, as a child, I had a deck of Marvel top trumps. You can get top trumps with like racing cars or fighter planes or football players. And I had all of the Marvel superheroes and all the supervillains in a deck. And I used to play it with my friends, so literally every character you can think of, they were all listed according to their height and weight and agility and their superpowers, and Thor and Loki were in there, so that was my memory.
How did Loki fare in top trumps?
Yeah, he was good. He would always lose if it was about strength and weight. If you picked agility and intelligence and strangely superpowers, he'd have the edge.
There's this great relationship in the movie between Thor and Loki. How important was it for you to nail that? Obviously there's lots of action and explosions in the movie and whatnot, but to nail that cycle, that core.
Well, we felt that in terms of the approach was sort of threefold. It was to definitely be on contemporary Earth, to bring this story to Earth, to bring humour to the story, and then to both create characters and then cast it with a kind of detail in the characterizations and in the execution of them that was as real as we could be. It's a relative reality in a comic book movie, but I think what works very well is when the boys have done wonderful jobs in it, I think, catch your breath by the intensity with which they feel things. So when you were rehearsing with the two of them and Tony Hopkins and talking about that dynamic between two rivalsome boys and a father who is demanding, and you've got some scenes that can take the intensity and passion that can spring from some of those challenges, it felt as though that would be part of what distinguished the film, made it a little different, is that we could in the drama of Asgard go quite a long way, but depending on who we cast and how they did it, and they both did a fantastic job.
And Chris, something to talk about working in that relationship between Thor and
yeah, I mean, we had a great time. I mean, sometimes you get lucky and you work with people who you get along with, and that just makes it an easier process and easier to find, little sort of hooks into the relationship, and we both know what it's like to have siblings and have that rivalry and have so much fun sort of playing around with it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of I'd add to that in that warring, competing brothers are just intrinsically, inherently, dramatically interesting. It doesn't mean if it's Cain and Abel back in the Bible, or it's Edmund and Edgar in King Lear, or any story really, where essentially you've got two opposing forces who are competing for the same thing. And in this case, it's the love and affection and pride of their father. And what's great about the two characters is that they're both enormously gifted. Thor is powerful and noble and strong and physically athletic and the leader of the pack. and Loki is fiercely intelligent, and he's a strategist and is a master of magic. So the two of them together are a force to be reckoned with, but going up against each other is a whole other thing. And I should also add that as an actor, it's much easier to be really nasty to someone that you really like, and that was. I mean, you can't really ask for that. You can't buy that. And Ken must have seen something that maybe with the two of us would get on or something. But when we first met, actually, I remember the three of us came over, and Natalie Portman was also there. And while Ken was talking to Natalie, we were dispatched by Ken to go and train together. And Chris had me lifting tree trunks and logs and
Tom taught me yoga.
Yeah.
That's a good combination.
Yeah.
We're doing yoga, and I said, Natalie Portman's going to be here in a second. I can't see doing this. Let's go break something.
Yeah. Let's go and throw ourselves through a tree.
Then Natalie Portman came in, and she was so flexible by that stage. She was halfway through her training for Black Swan, and she would just drape a leg over the edge of the sofa and be incredibly physically impressive right to standing tall.
Excellent. Let's take some questions. Let's start with John in the front row. There's a microphone coming around.
Thank you.
It's a question for Kenneth. It sounds as though entering the world of Asgard meant fulfilling a childhood ambition. And if that's the case, I wonder then if there are only two left that you have any chance of fulfilling, playing for Linfield and appearing in Coronation Street.
Well, I think the Linfield one's very probably gone. I think it was always gone. Oh, really? Well, it was a fantastic opportunity. It was a great adventure, and it was, in a way, it was a great surprise to be considered for it, and then to kind of go up for the job and try and get it, and then to do actually something I hadn't done before, which is spent a couple of years in Hollywood. I'd never done that before. I'd flitted in, flitted out. I've been privileged to be asked to go and do things there. But the whole sort of combination of some of the things that the boys were talking about in terms of the story elements that probably, you wouldn't be surprised, interested me in terms of those big problems in royal families that have been in some of the rest of the work I've done. But the great sort of mystery of visual effects, CGI and 3D, developing stories that are part of a great big film universe that's fiercely protected by the people who have worked so hard to create it. Across a long period of time, and keeping your energy and your focus on the job. That was quite something. So I was in some familiar territory with great talents, and I was in some very unfamiliar territory. So I sort of deliberately, once I had the joy of getting the job, embraced putting myself in way out of my comfort zone. But it was a very thrillingly bumpy ride.
Lady in the front row, please.
Japanese media, I have two questions to Mr. Branagh. Firstly, speaking from your theatrical background, are there any similarities between stage acting and green screen acting, do you think? And also, given the popularity of the comic book, did you feel any pressure taking on this project, perhaps referring back to the source material, just visual assessment?
I'll answer the second one first, which is that I've been involved, it's so thrilling to be making this picture and not be answering questions at this stage that began with, why have you made a remake? Why have you done this film before it was so well done the first time, or the first 3 or 4 times? So that was exciting. The pressure from purists, if you like, has always been there. You know you can't please everyone, but you hope you can entertain everyone. And I love the passion and the debate that's attached to this material. To have that many people that interested in what you're doing, it's an absolute thrill. Believe me, I've sometimes been trying to promote films where that hasn't been the case. That's a thrill, so I'm very happy. I'm going to ask the boys the other question. I will preface it by just saying that Natalie Portman said at one stage, interestingly, that she felt that actors should have special training in how to act in green screen when there's nothing there. But boys, what did you...
I mean, we were very fortunate. There was actually far less green screen than I think people imagine. We had these beautiful big sets that we were on and could interact with and be a part of. And the smaller piece of green screen that we had, we thankfully had Ken to sort of fill us with a visual, very vivid, sort of colourful picture of what was going on. And it's a whole other skill again. It's a very sort of numbing feeling being on green screen, and then the hum of the lights and everything's very sort of hypnotic. And you need to really sort of bring your energy up. You know, it's different to being on a set that there's glaciers have been built, or you're in a big throne room, and it's you know, you feel like you're part of that world.
And because of the way we shot the end scene, talk about a little, if you wouldn't mind, about just you two fighting each other and what that sometimes meant, in fact.
Yeah, well, at the very end of the film, when the two of us are fighting on the Rainbow Bridge in Asgard, this shining city in the sky, it's very difficult for location scouts to go and find those two things. So the two of us were in a green screen warehouse, and quite often, because of the position of the camera, and I do all kinds of crazy things which really should be on under special skills on my CV, like self-duplicate, disappear, reappear, fly through the air. Sometimes where you know, Ken needed the camera to be in a particular position, moving in a particular way to give a huge dynamism and vitality to the shot. And in actual fact, it meant that a lot of the time I'm looking or speaking to Chris, and he couldn't actually be there, because that would mean him hanging from the ceiling in the most uncompromising position, unknown to man. So you sort of have to light some kind of bonfire underneath your imagination. And often, instead of Chris, it might be his double, or more often a tennis ball, or even a little coloured mark of sellotape next to the lens on the camera. But acting is all about imagination anyway. It doesn't matter if you're on stage, or if you're on television, or if you're on film. Your imagination is working overtime. And the great thing about having Ken do it was that he was always on hand with a microphone, quite often literally painting the picture on our behalf. So in Jotunheim, in the ice planet, we'd be walking along brilliant sets of ice flows, surrounded by a green screen, and Ken would be there saying, to your left, there's an ice tower crumbling into pieces. To your right, there are shadows. Frost giants could be coming out of those at any time. You're excited, you're freezing cold, you're terrified. Beyond you is a plaza.
Just in my view, the visual effects supervisor was saying, I think that's going to be a great script. I think I'm going to give you a crevice there. But the other thing which Tom was also hinting at was that because both Tom and Chris, probably a year before we started shooting, were rehearsing, and rehearsed again in summer, and rehearsed for a couple of weeks before we started shooting, and rehearsed on their own. All of that was there for them to call on, not only when they worked with us, but when they were with the second unit, with Great Vic Armstrong. So all of that was money in the bank for us, I think, by way of preparation.
There's a lady in front row.
A question for Chris. I just wondered how intimidating it was to be faced with Anthony Hopkins in full godlike mode. And a question for Mr. Branagh, whether you were influenced by the fact that this is part of effectively a franchise and there are other films in it. Were there certain marks that you had to hit or plot lines that you had to follow?
Yeah, walking into this, the idea of standing opposite Anthony Hopkins in godlike, regal outfit is, and he has that quality that, in my mind, in every film, was intimidating. But I got to say, the moment I got on set and met him, it was, I couldn't have felt more supported and comfortable. He is extremely collaborative and kind, and has a great sense of humour and a great passion for the filmmaking and storytelling. And a number of times would turn to me and say, "How fun is this? Isn't this great? Isn't Ken wonderful?" And it's just that was the vibe on set, and it was such a enjoyable experience.
And I think he was. He told lots of great war stories about his time as a young actor, basically. His first film performance, I believe, people in this room probably correct me if I know, but I think it was Lion in Winter, which was when he was about 30, and he was on screen with Catherine Hepburn and Peter O'Toole and Timothy Dalton, and he was just talking about first time in films, and he loved seeing he loved sort of seeing the boys at the beginning, what these great careers they're about to have. And that was exciting. As far as the Marvel Universe is concerned, I basically kept my head down and concentrated on Thor. Occasionally I would say, I see the place name of that place has changed, why is that? And they'd say, well, that's fine, let me tell you about this, and they would explain something that happened, none of which I can give away, otherwise I don't have to kill you, obviously. they did it so subtly that I didn't ever feel we were being tugged in any particular direction. They were smart enough to know that, you know, they have the Captain America coming up in the Avengers. They didn't really haven't planned that much further. They had many hopes and dreams, I'm sure, but we all knew that unless we put all our eggs in this basket and really concentrated, there'd be no point in worrying about how it fitted in with the rest of the universe. There are lots of little kind of surprises in there, I think, but there were ones I was told about, and if there were ones that I was forced to do, they did it so brilliantly that I didn't even notice.
A couple more questions from the front row, and then we will fan out, I promise you. Gentleman there.
It's for Kenneth Branagh. Just following on from a previous question, I wondered if what your reaction was to appearing at various Comic-Cons, and whether your reaction with that completist, as you put it, informed the way you approached the film.
Well, when I went to Comic-Con in San Diego, my first experience of a comic convention, I felt as though I was looking at a lot of people who reminded me of what I was like when I was 16, 17, 18, and discovering that I loved being an actor, and suddenly was travelling to Stratford-on-Avon to watch plays and getting copies of a theatre magazine called Plays and Players, in which a young man called Tony Hopkins appeared for the first time, and making those connections. And I was obsessive, fanatical, and retained some of that now. So none of the intensity of feeling through me. I mean, you could, if we were to listen to every passionate fan about how to make a film, there'd be thousands and thousands of different films, but I mean, you can spend quite a lot of time with a real cognoscenti fan talking about helmet length, type of helmet, type of horn, type of metal, which powers it has, which worlds it could survive in, which worlds it couldn't survive in. And, you know, we try and address that in as much as it helps us to tell the story. But so we hope that there are lots of things in there for fans. But honestly, we also, I think, constantly wanted to have the film open to people who weren't aware of these characters or the Marvel Universe or anything, just coming hopefully to hopefully be entertained by a big summer movie.
Tom, you and Ken worked together on TV and on the stage.
Yeah.
Now he's your director in a movie. How did that dynamic change?
Well, it really is. I mean, acting is a bit like tennis. You can't really do it on your own. And I suppose acting takes a degree of mutual trust and respect. And over the years of doing Wallander and Chekhov's Ivanov in the West End, we've exchanged a few words. And really, it's actually a huge privilege to be directed by somebody who I felt so known, understood, and trusted by, or trusted in rather. You know, Ken was asking me to go to some pretty extreme places from time to time emotionally, and it's always nice to know that the man behind the eye, behind the lens, behind the camera is someone who knows what it's like to go to those extreme places in performance, and sometimes how challenging that is, but also somebody who is just very supportive and trusting. So it was a huge privilege.
Now the gentleman in the front row.
Hi, Kenneth. You said that Marvel had been very subtle in the directives they gave you towards how it fit into Avengers. I mean, did you seek advice from the likes of Jon Favreau or anybody about making this film at all? And if so, what kind of advice did they give you? And did you speak to maybe Joss Whedon? And also, Chris, knowing that there was going to be an Avengers movie, did that affect how you played Thor? That they give you a lot of advice about how to play?
I did speak to John during our prep and while John was doing Iron Man 2. I spoke to Robert Downey, who I worked with before, who was a very good friend. And I spoke to Joss, who also spoke to me about Chris, and also spoke to me before he sort of joined the Marvel Universe. And there's not much you can do except pass on instincts and feelings. The particularities of each film are so separate and so distinct. What you share is a knowledge of the immensity of it. And in John's case, a reminder, you know, just take one step at a time, one thing at a time, and concentrate on what you're good at. And, you know, and as I've always tried to do, surround yourself by talented people and try and keep up with them. And that's what you do with something like this, and visual effects and everything that come with it are new to you. So it's trying to if you feel your skills are there as a storyteller to try and edit and direct what other people do. John said interestingly though, however, and I don't know if this will end up being true, but he felt it was for him at that time, he said, once you've done one of these, he says, it's very hard to go back to a little movie. And he was right in the middle of being sort of right on the maelstrom of Iron Man 2. And, but there was this collegiate feeling, as there is with Joe Johnson. It's an unusual job to do, and so it's good to talk with people who've done it as well.
When I came on with Thor, there was certainly the knowledge that we would have Avengers in the future. But no, it didn't affect the way I was playing for Thor. Was certainly what I had right in front of me, and in order to, I had to develop Thor in order to use him in Avengers. So it became about what I had, right there and then. Yeah.
And Thomas, bring you in. Do you know anything about involvement in the Avengers at this point in time?
All I know is that it's being made.
There's a gentleman 5 rows back.
Ken, obviously the film's not only effects heavy, but it's been converted into 3D as well. How did the knowledge that it was going to be sort of not quite what you're seeing on the monitors while you're making the film affect the way you made the film?
We had, it's an interesting question, we worked as hard as we could to prepare for what our knowledge of 3D could equip us with. So we knew that we didn't want to give people a headache with 3D. So 2 reasons not to shoot in 3D, but to convert and render the 1,300 odd visual effects in 3D were to have more time on set, because it's pretty challenging. Pretty challenging for me, I tell you, the sort of maths of working out the parallax and the retinal rivalry and the depth curves and all of that. But we also wanted to, as we were able to do with conversion, create a kind of depth script. You set up 2 3D cameras and you work out the depth of one particular shot, may be perfect for that. When you set it against other shots, you may find that factor in 3D that can hurt your eyes sometimes is quite significant. In conversion across 9 months, a year, we sat and watched twice a week in the early days of just watching to see whether if a hammer comes at you or snow comes at you or the stars whiz by you, but then you get a shot where you're in the New Mexican desert, does it do something, does it hurt? And we were able to smooth out that depth curve and kind of produce the best effects of it all the way through the movie in terms of how we wanted to tell the story. It was definitely a learning process. It was definitely something where you'll be on the set ringing our 3D collaborator Stereo D saying, I'm about to do this. You tell me to do a whip pan in this shot is gonna hurt. How slow do I need to make it? Or can we do it slow motion? Can we speed it up in post-production? Will that help you? And can we have a floating window and blah, blah, blah. But we just kept, we kept talking about it, and that was part of what was fun actually, because you had this little magic toy box that eventually would hopefully be something people didn't really care the technical details about in the theatre, but just had some enhanced value.
Kenneth, Norse mythology, as represented in Thor, seems to denigrate belief in higher beings. It shows them that they're as fallible as the rest of us. What's your take on that?
I think it's part of the Norse myths and part of what humans like in them is to see human qualities paradoxically reflected in gods. Somehow it seems to be part of a fascination with the lives of the mighty and powerful who are privileged and have gifts, or in this case powers, that we don't have. So that ought to make them happy, shouldn't it? It ought to be the kind of thing to aspire to. It often doesn't. And so in the heightened circumstances of their lives, where their mistake can cost lives, or it can mean that countries change hands or worlds explode, following their love affairs, their rivalries, their hatreds, their jealousies, their self-doubt, etc., I think is a sort of cathartic way to understand some of our own. And along the way, of course, you're entertained because those lives are involved, in this case, space travel and worlds of ice and worlds of gold, and the comic clash between entitled princes of Asgard and very indifferent waitresses in New Mexican diners. So we always thought that that basic tension between otherworldly people or privileged people who certainly seem closer to us than we might otherwise understand is illuminating.
Let's jump in here and be saying around.
Question, I guess, Kenneth. We're seeing a lot of superhero on market like comic book movies. We have more events like Comic-Con and this weekend Kapow. I'm wondering, do you think the increase in these comic book movies is down to technology, or is it down to actually the fact that Hollywood in some ways has caught up with the fact that there's a generation of people who can greenlight projects, being aware of it as an art form rather than something that's just for kids, say, 20 years ago?
It's an interesting question that's difficult to answer. I think it's a combination of those things where film technology means that the spectacular, larger-than-life worlds of many of the kinds of stories that we're talking about are possible to create big screen experiences very distinct for these tentpole movies that maybe other places you want to go see that kind of story in, preferably rather than in your, although brilliant, smaller home system. So it's a venue for a certain kind of story. And I think there is this tremendous community of passionate and interested people who are ahead of the curve in terms of understanding that the word comic does not mean easy, simple, or simplistic. It happens to be connected to what is often fiendishly clever plotting, fiendishly clever writing, fiendishly economic, and allied with incredible artistry, visual artistry. So many exciting ideas are there. So I think a number of those things start to explain, I guess.
I just want to bring Chris and Tom in again. You're playing larger-than-life characters, often against green screen. How much did the costumes help?
It's helped a hell of a lot. I remember first putting the costume on and having read the comic books the previous 6 months and imagining how I was going to play this guy and convincing yourself and everyone else that this is what it's going to be. These costumes were so incredibly detailed and told such an image that you put it on and you, for the first time, really, you feel like the character. And that certainly makes our job easier. It makes you stand different, it makes you walk different, and it was just another layer to add on and work with.
Yeah, I would second that entirely. I think if you get up in the morning and you put on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, you feel like going to the beach. But if you get up in the morning and you put on a breastplate and a backplate and a cape and a horned helmet, you feel like striding around a Norse palace. So they are, Alex Byrne, who designed the costumes, did the most extraordinary job, because they're so faithful actually to the hyper-real, almost unreal quality of the comic book costumes. And not only do they look right and look great, but she was able to design costumes that we could fight in and we could run in and roll around in the snow in the great challenge was actually having a loo break, but at least we could knock 10 bars out of each other.
That's about the time. There's a gentleman here in front row and a gentleman over here on the left-hand side.
Kenneth, obviously the film is stunning to look at, but how important do you think there's a very clever comedy thread running through the intermittent, well, not jokes, but those sequences, how important they were for sort of changing the tone slightly? And just a slightly second question, how easy do you find to mesh your two careers as an actor and director?
In answer to the first question, I think we all felt that it was crucial that there was a lightness of tone. We obviously, as you can tell, we tried to take the job of producing this piece of entertainment as seriously as possible, but we definitely wanted to not have the film take itself too seriously. We wanted the film, the characters in their way, to have a sort of twinkle in their eye, but we didn't want to mock them or second guess them. So it was a very, very delicate thing to do. But it depended at all times on trying to reach this kind of simplicity. As you were talking about earlier on, it's a sort of archetypal idea and part of the myth. Gods amongst men is a well-trodden path in terms of an idea, and it produces dramatic tension, comic tension, and romantic tension if you produce a potential relationship between two people from different worlds and then break it up. So it became the way to accept all of these different tones. If you want a movie in which you hope people might be thrilled in the cinema by 6 warriors galloping on horses across a rainbow bridge in the middle of outer space, then you need at other points in the movie a sort of sense that we are celebrating that, loving it, but we're not necessarily saying that we absolutely think that that's occurring even as we speak. But as Jane Foster says, with passion and sometimes with humour, magic is just science we don't understand yet. So humour became essential to do all that. And in terms of the acting and directing, I try and follow my instinct. I try and listen when I have an opportunity to choose, which isn't always, but when I do, I try and listen for the instinct of what I think will, make me feel passionate and engage me, and I follow that and work out. It's not a question of, well, direct, I like, because life doesn't work like that. It's just where does one's sort of artistic kind of instinct take one, and it's still taking me to both places. Actually, as an actor, one of the most exciting things is working with these two fellas and with the rest of our cast. That's wonderful. There's actually a great thrill in watching how other people do it. They always do it differently, and it's great to learn from these guys, and I unquestionably have, and from the more established folk like Tony and Natalie. As an actor, actually, it's a great privilege. It sends me back into actually acting with fantastic relish and ready to steal everything that I've learned from these guys.
I was just first question. Chris and I just sort of finished film very recently, and I think with the humour aspect, I think Ken has done the most extraordinary job of appealing to just about everybody with this film. So Thor fans and die-hard, comic book enthusiasts will be so satisfied by what they see, but I think Ken's delivered a sci-fi, fantasy, action, adventure, epic, but sort of like a Russian doll wrapped up inside that is a sort of comedy, caper romance and a dynastic drama, so that whatever you like from your movie-going experience, you kind of got it all in this one.
Well, Christ knows we hope so. But you'll note that at the end of when Tom very, very kindly says all of that, you will note at the end of the movie, if you stayed, because there's a special treat at the end of the movie, for those of you who like such things, you will have noticed about 7 minutes of credits and about 3,000 or 4,000 names, and including us three, and those are the people who, one of these pictures, as we all know, is a sort of incredible partnership, so finding that tone and everything is part of all our sensibilities. Very good judgment from these guys when they come in the morning and, we talk about a line or in rehearsal, all of it it's more than any other picture I've ever worked on. It is a team effort of necessarily of the kind of ultimate kind.
Gentlemen, second.
What was the best and also what was the worst piece of advice you ever got from somebody else in the business? And did you pass any words of wisdom on to the gentleman on your left?
Best piece of advice. Well, the best piece of advice, it sounds so corny, was to try and follow your instinct. Easy to say, hard to do. Worst piece of advice? I don't know. I usually give myself the worst piece of advice, I think. I guess, I don't know. I mean, it's funny about advice, isn't it, in this business? You don't really want any, do you, when you ask people for advice? Nobody does. You ask, I've got this terrible decision to make, I don't know what to do, which essentially is a version of, but enough about me, what did you think of my performance? So I've tended not to ask, because I know I'm too stupid to take it. Boys. No, I thrill you. Wisdom beyond my years.
I keep. It's I find that I always try and listen for quotes and find me quotes that I can have in interviews and things, and I learned this one particular thing, but I don't. It often doesn't happen as simple as that. Like for me, what I got from Ken was the whole process and his attitude to work and his love for what he was doing and the preparation and the enthusiasm, and it was an overall sort of thing I got from personally from his in the way he lived and conducted himself on set. There wasn't a sort of sit down one sort of classic line necessarily. Good. That one I remember to listen to.
Yeah. I guess I'd say the same. Actually, my housemate this morning was walking around the house wearing a T-shirt which just read, "Work hard and be nice to people." And I think that's probably something I've learned from Ken. And everybody is actually something that Ken probably doesn't know is quite as specific to him, is that he doesn't leave a single stone unturned. Everything in the story is excavated. Every possibility is looked into with an extraordinary curiosity and the kind of power of his intellect and almost encyclopedic knowledge of different things. So any number of you can get any number of different sorts of notes from Ken, acting notes. You know, it could be, this is your Peter O'Toole take, or in one instance he came up to me and said, Tom, this is the moment where the thin steel rod that's holding your brain together snaps. And then walked away, and then probably spat on his heels, came back and said, I'm aware, by the way, that that's a rather challenging thing to ask you to do, so we can have a couple of goes.
I got similar things, and also this is the take where you go berserk, and you with your mates in the pub and just let us go. Yeah, so
it was one of the things we because we kept wanting to retain wild man Thor, the berserker strain of the Vikings, the absolutely wild, unbridled kind of warrior nature we used to refer to. So we talk about a berserker take, and we were always talking about the point at which Loki may or may not have stepped over into the other side of what may or may not have been madness, or may not have been a kind of evil. So there was always a kind of ongoing conversation as it was evolving about when that might happen. And then what they were both very generous about was being brave enough to offer up different kinds of things. Sometimes actors come in and go, that's how I'm doing it. I do this bit loud, I do that bit quiet. I'm funny here. I've got 2 tricks and you'll see them both by lunchtime. Whereas they're ready to, across any number of takes, which isn't always easy. Some actors think there's something wrong. They've got it wrong if you go over 3 takes. But again, rehearsal helped to say, hey, no, this is the moment when. And if you can trust me that we will sculpt every single moment. The glory of film is, if you're great for 0.25 of a second, it's in. It's in. That look is in. And that's movies. That's when suddenly both these performances just have that. There are moments in it where, in the editing room, your heart leaps. It's just fantastic. You think, Christ, but that's in a bad take. But it's amazing. I can take that jewel out of there, and I can put it over here where he's absolutely brilliant. Often they were brilliant all the way through. But the construction of that kind of thing is great. Something I remember from my first film, because I was in it, and I realised I could stop myself being as bad as I had been in some of the scenes I was in by putting it all together. Magic of editing.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for. I'm sorry we didn't get around to your questions. But thanks for coming, thanks for your questions, and please give it up to Kenneth Branagh. Thanks very much for